The reading of my father's will lasted exactly 19 minutes and 42 seconds. I know, because I watched every second crawl by on the brass grandfather clock standing in the corner of his study, the same clock that used to tick through every dinner I spent pretending to be part of the Mercer family. That room always smelled of him, cedar, scotch, and authority. The walls were lined with portraits of men who looked like they hadn't smiled in a century. The Mercer lineage was full of power brokers, industrial tycoons, and ruthless negotiators. And somewhere, in that lineage of perfect heirs, was me, Caleb Mercer, the mistake no one talked about, the footnote son my father once referred to as a complicated chapter best left unread. The will reading was held in Richard Mercer's private study at the Arlington estate. The curtains were drawn, dust dancing in the sunlight that barely made it past the heavy drapes. A bottle of aged Glenfiddich sat half-empty on the corner table, the same one he'd been drinking from the night before he died. They said he passed quietly, mid-signature, his hand still clutching a pen. Some said poetic. I said predictable. The man couldn't stop working, not even for death. Across from me sat Daniel, my oldest brother, 36, broad shoulders, perfect tie knot, already wearing Dad's Rolex like he'd inherited his time the moment the old man's heart stopped. Beside him was Eli, the middle child, 33, the talker, the charmer, the one who thought every problem could be solved with a glass of champagne and a headline. And then there was me, the third, unofficial Mercer. The one whose name wasn't engraved on any of the family portraits hanging behind us. The attorney, Thomas Grant, cleared his throat. He'd been with our family for 3 decades, tall, thin, with eyes that looked too tired to care but too loyal to leave. When he spoke, the room shifted. This will, he said, adjusting his glasses, was finalized 6 months before Mr. Mercer's passing. It supersedes all previous versions. Daniel leaned back, confident. Eli smirked like he already knew what was coming. They'd been preparing for this moment their entire lives, groomed for legacy, fed on entitlement. I just sat quietly, watching dust float between us. To my eldest son, Daniel Mercer, Grant continued, I leave the Mercer Towers development and all associated New York holdings, valued at $12 million. Daniel's grin widened. He raised an eyebrow at me, as if to say watch and learn, kid. To my second son, Eli Mercer, I leave the Hampton estate, the complete yacht collection, and all vehicles and holdings listed under Mercer Leisure Group, valued at $10 million. Eli actually clapped his hands once, laughing. Guess I'll take the Hamptons off your hands, Danny boy. Then came the silence. The kind that fills a room when everyone already knows who's left. Grant hesitated. I saw it, the microsecond of pity that passed through his eyes. He reached into his leather briefcase, pulling out a single brown envelope. It looked ancient. The corners were bent, the seal fragile. My name was written across the front, Caleb Mercer, in shaky ink that dragged across the page, like Dad's hand had trembled as he wrote it. To my youngest son, Caleb Mercer, Grant said softly, I leave this. An envelope. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Daniel laughed. Not the kind of laugh people share, the kind meant to humiliate. You've got to be kidding, he said, nearly choking on his drink. An envelope? Dad leaves me Manhattan, Eli gets the Hamptons, and Caleb gets mail? Eli leaned forward, smirking. Maybe it's a coupon, he said. 10% off therapy. You're gonna need it. Their laughter filled the room, expensive, cruel, practiced. It was the sound of people who'd never been told no. I didn't react. Didn't blink. Just stared at the envelope as Grant placed it in front of me, his hands trembling slightly. The weight of it, or the lack of it, told me everything I needed to know. It weighed less than a paperclip, but it carried 29 years of rejection. Then Grant said something unexpected. His tone shifted, softer, almost hesitant. Your father requested that I read one final statement. He unfolded a smaller note and read aloud. Birth may grant a name, but only truth grants inheritance. I trust my sons will each receive what they deserve. The words hung in the air like smoke. Eli rolled his eyes. Daniel poured himself another drink. But Grant, he looked uneasy. His voice had cracked slightly when he read the line, as though he knew what it really meant. I took the envelope, stood, and walked out without saying a word. Daniel called after me, voice dripping with arrogance. Hey, Caleb. If you ever need a job, I could use someone to wash the cars at the Hampton estate. Laughter followed me out, echoing down the hallway lined with portraits of Mercer men who all looked the same, stern eyes, expensive suits, cold hearts. I stepped out into the October air. It was crisp, the sky pale blue, the driveway littered with orange leaves that had fallen like confetti for the wrong celebration. My old Toyota sat between their Escalades and Maseratis, like an uninvited guest in the family photo. When I sat inside, I didn't start the car. I just stared at the envelope lying on the passenger seat. The handwriting, fragile, fading, looked like it belonged to a dying man trying to confess something he couldn't say out loud. Back in my apartment that night, I made coffee I didn't drink and sat under the weak light of my desk lamp. The envelope was still there, waiting. My fingers hovered over it for a long time. I wasn't sure what I wanted more, truth, or another lie I could live with. Finally, I opened it. Inside was a single folded note. No will, no letter, no apology. Just one line, written in black ink that had faded at the edges. This is for the son who was never counted. And below it, a sequence of numbers. An account code. No signature. No explanation. That's when I realized something strange. The handwriting wasn't from his last days. It was older. Stronger. Confident. Like it had been written decades ago, back when his hand didn't tremble. I didn't know it yet, but that envelope didn't just contain an account number. It contained the blueprint to a secret that would rip open everything I thought I knew about my family, about my mother, my father, and why I was never meant to exist in the first place. That envelope was never a punishment. It was a confession. And my father's 19-minute will was just the prologue to a story he'd spent his life trying to bury. They say memory is unreliable, that your mind protects you from what it can't process. If that's true, then mine's been working overtime since I was a kid. The earliest memory I have is sound, the squeal of tires, a horn that never stopped, and my mother's voice saying my name one last time, "Caleb, close your eyes." After that, everything was quiet. They told me it was a car accident. A tire blew out, the car flipped, and she died instantly. A tragedy, they said. But even at 4 years old, I remember the smell, gasoline and something sharp, like burnt metal. And the image of my father standing on the roadside hours later, still in his suit, watching the wreck like he was studying a project plan gone wrong. My mother, Laura Pierce, was the kind of woman who believed in fixing things, machines, people, broken promises. She was an engineer at Mercer Construction long before she was my father's secret. The company was her passion, the affair was her mistake. She loved him, I think. But love isn't enough when it's competing with empire. After she died, I was moved into the Mercer estate in Arlington, Virginia, a 40-room monument to isolation. The kind of house where sound gets swallowed whole, and even whispers echo like confessions. They didn't call me Caleb there. I was the boy. The staff avoided eye contact, the neighbors pretended not to recognize me, and my brothers treated me like the ghost that came with the property. Daniel was 12 when I arrived, already molded into a perfect heir. He wore confidence like armor and arrogance like cologne. Eli was 9, smaller but sharper, the kind who smiled while he watched you drown. Dinner at the Mercer estate was a ceremony. Every night at 7 o'clock, we'd sit around the long oak table under a chandelier that hummed like a nervous secret. My father at the head, Daniel and Eli on either side, and me, somewhere near the end. The plates were silver, the food was perfect, and the silence was absolute. If Daniel spoke, it was about stocks or acquisitions. If Eli spoke, it was about the next deal. If I spoke, it was by accident. My father would occasionally glance at me, not to connect, but to confirm I was still there. "Do you need anything for school, Caleb?" he'd ask, like checking a box on a form. And I'd answer the same every time. "No, sir." That was our dynamic, me asking for nothing, him offering even less. The first time I called him Dad, he corrected me. "You can call me Richard," he said, not even looking up from his paperwork. "It'll make things easier." Easier for who? I never asked. By 12, I understood that blood wasn't family. Family was something you earned by following rules, and mine came with fine print. At school, I was the Mercer kid, but never a Mercer. Teachers whispered about the scandal behind my mother's name. Classmates repeated their parents' gossip. I learned to stop correcting them. Silence was safer. Daniel and Eli, though, they thrived. Daniel joined Mercer Construction at 21, his first day as vice president. Eli followed 2 years later as Director of Public Relations. Titles my father gave them before they'd even earned diplomas. And me? I started in the basement, literally. The records department. No windows, no recognition, no light. I organized files for projects worth millions, blueprints, permits, invoices, all stamped with Mercer Construction's logo and my father's name. That's where I started noticing things. Documents that didn't match. Signatures that looked forged. Contracts labeled confidential, government infrastructure that had payout amounts larger than the projects themselves. And a few stamped with a red symbol I didn't understand at the time. Project Halcyon. Every time I came across that name, I felt like I'd opened something I wasn't supposed to see. Once, I asked my father about it. He didn't even let me finish. "You're not paid to think," he said. "You're paid to stay quiet." But I wasn't paid at all. I was family. Which, in the Mercer world, meant indentured loyalty. Years passed. I went from being the forgotten son to the quiet worker, invisible, efficient, obedient. I built a career outside of Mercer Construction, launching my own consulting firm in D.C. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. For the first time, I was living without their shadow. But the past doesn't fade, it just waits. When my father got sick last year, Daniel and Eli suddenly became the perfect sons. Weekly visits. Public sympathy posts. They weren't mourning him, they were rehearsing their acceptance speeches for the inheritance. Meanwhile, I kept my distance. The last time I saw him alive, he was in his study, the same one where the will would later be read. He was thinner, older, but still commanding. The oxygen tube didn't diminish him. He looked at me for a long time before speaking. "You look like her," he said finally. "Your mother." It was the first time he'd ever said her name. Then, without meeting my eyes, he added, "Some things die with time, Caleb. Some things shouldn't." I didn't understand what he meant then. But after that envelope appeared at the will reading, I did. My father hadn't been haunted by guilt. He'd been haunted by unfinished business. The day after the will reading, I sat in my apartment, the envelope still on the table like a ticking bomb. I couldn't shake that line. "This is for the son who was never counted." What did it mean? Why, never counted? Late that night, I typed the numbers from the envelope into my laptop. It wasn't a bank account number from any regular US bank. The prefix was international, Zurich. My pulse kicked. But before I could search further, something stopped me. An old memory, faint, buried, surfaced. I was 8. Standing outside my father's office. He was yelling into the phone. "If those documents ever surface, we're all finished. Do you understand? I don't care who finds out, destroy everything connected to Pierce." Pierce. My mother's name. That was the moment I realized, she wasn't just collateral in a scandal. She was part of it. The night she died? Maybe it wasn't an accident. And if I was the son who was never counted, maybe that wasn't an insult. Maybe it was protection. I didn't sleep that night. The envelope sat on my desk under the glow of my lamp like a relic from another world. Every time I looked at it, the words blurred together, the son who was never counted. By sunrise, I'd memorized every detail of that paper, the thickness, the faint smell of old ink, even the indentation where his pen had pressed too hard. It wasn't just a message. It was a breadcrumb. I opened my laptop again and retyped the account number. This time, I used a VPN, bouncing through 3 servers before landing on an old Swiss banking registry. The prefix wasn't Zurich, not exactly. It was tied to something older, Helios Private Bank, a discreet financial institution known for handling private corporate assets in sensitive industries. The name Helios triggered something. I went to the file cabinet in my living room, the one holding years of project records I'd taken from the Mercer archives before quitting. I pulled out a folder marked Archive Defense Projects, 1995 to 2001. Halfway through the stack, I found it, a contract dated July 1998, signed by Richard Mercer, CEO, and a representative from Helios Technologies. The project name, Halcyon Initiative. The same name that had appeared on dozens of classified documents I'd stumbled across in the Mercer basement years ago. At the time, I didn't understand what it meant. Now, I did. Halcyon wasn't just a project. It was a government defense contract. And not a clean one. The contract details were vague, infrastructure development for defense research sites. But the attached invoices told another story, millions funneled through shell companies, offshore accounts, and private partnerships. And one of those partnerships was with Helios Private Bank, the same institution listed on my envelope's code. My heart started to pound. I searched for Helios online, scrolling through years of nothing until I hit a small, archived article dated 2002. Federal investigation into Helios Technologies and Mercer Construction suspended after mysterious fire destroys evidence facility in Arlington. My breath caught. Arlington, my home. My father's estate. That wasn't a coincidence. He didn't just work with Helios, he buried them. But there was something even stranger. The article mentioned 3 key figures in the investigation. Richard Mercer, CEO of Mercer Construction. Senator Leonard Ashworth. And Laura Pierce, project engineer. My mother. Her name was right there, printed in black and white. I froze. It felt like the world had narrowed down to that one line. Laura Pierce, not as a victim, not as a secretary, but as a whistleblower. The pieces clicked, painfully slow but certain. She had discovered what they were doing, government money being siphoned, data sold to defense competitors, lives being manipulated for profit. She had confronted him. And then, a week later, her car lost control. The truth didn't just hurt. It hollowed me out. I sat back in my chair, hands shaking, staring at my father's final note. This is for the son who was never counted. Maybe he didn't count me because he couldn't protect me if I was seen. Maybe he had spent the last 2 decades hiding me from the same people who killed her. I needed answers. By afternoon, I was parked in front of the Mercer law firm, the same glass building where Thomas Grant, our family attorney, had read the will. He looked startled when he saw me. "Caleb," he said, standing too quickly. "You shouldn't be here." "I think I should," I said, sliding the envelope across his desk. "You knew what this was, didn't you?" His eyes darted to the closed office door. "Lower your voice." That was confirmation enough. "What was Project Halcyon?" I asked. "And why is my mother's name on government documents tied to it?" He exhaled, a long, defeated sound. "Your father made mistakes, Caleb. Big ones. But he tried to fix them. The envelope was his attempt to make amends." "Amends for what? Killing her?" He flinched. "He didn't kill her. He covered for her." The room tilted. "Covered? Your mother wasn't just an engineer. She was the one who discovered the Helios embezzlement scheme. She took files, reported it to federal auditors. But the moment her report was logged, the people behind Helios panicked. If the evidence reached the Senate Oversight Committee, several careers would collapse, and not just corporate ones. Your father found out too late. He tried to pull her out. She refused. He rubbed his temples. She was killed 3 days later. Officially a car accident. Privately, a message. And your father, he couldn't expose the people responsible without losing you too. I couldn't breathe. So he let everyone believe she died by accident. And then what, just moved on? Grant shook his head. No. He built an account in your name. He transferred every untainted cent of his fortune there, and buried the rest behind the Helios firewall. The Zurich code you found, it's tied to the funds your mother was trying to protect. My thoughts raced. If what Grant said was true, then that account didn't just hold money. It held proof. Who else knows about this? I asked. He hesitated. Your brothers, he said finally. They don't know the full truth, but they knew enough. Daniel found fragments of the Halcyon files years ago. Your father made them sign NDA agreements and removed their access. They resented him, and you, ever since. It was like my entire life had been a play written by people I didn't know were actors. And my father's coldness wasn't hate, it was strategy. He hadn't kept me at arm's length to punish me. He'd done it to hide me. That night, I opened my laptop again. The Helios Bank login screen blinked at me like a doorway to the past. I typed the account code from the envelope, followed by my social security number. The final field was a security question. Mother's favorite quote. I froze. He'd known I'd try to find it. It took me a few seconds to remember the answer. When I was little, my mother used to whisper it every time I doubted myself. Truth doesn't break you. It frees you. I typed it in. The page loaded. And then, there it was. A number I couldn't comprehend. $127,400,000. At first, I thought it was a glitch. I refreshed the page twice. The number stayed. Attached to it were digital folders, labeled in my father's old system. Halcyon Data Archive /1996 to 2020 /do not delete. I clicked. Inside were hundreds of files, emails, contracts, audio recordings, payment trails, all linking Mercer Construction and several U.S. defense contractors to an illegal privatization ring. A trail of corruption that had funded my father's empire and destroyed my mother. The account didn't just hold his money. It held his confession. And I realized something chilling. He'd waited for me to find it. He knew Daniel and Eli would take everything tangible, the cars, the houses, the empire. But I would inherit what mattered most, the truth. Then, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. International. I answered. Mr. Mercer, a voice said, deep and accented. My name is Klaus Dierman. I worked with your mother. And your father. You've opened the account, yes? My stomach dropped. Who are you? Someone who's been waiting 25 years for you to see what they couldn't. There is a file in that account labeled Mercer/Directive 9. That file is your mother's final report, and your father's final redemption. Why are you telling me this? Because they're watching again, he said quietly. And you need to decide what kind of Mercer you'll be, the kind who buries truth, or the kind who exposes it. Then he hung up. The screen dimmed, and I stared at the folder labeled Directive 9. When I opened it, I found a single document with my mother's handwriting scanned across the top. And a video file, timestamped 2 days before she died. Her voice filled the room. If you're seeing this, Richard, it means they found me first. But maybe they won't find him. My breath caught. She wasn't talking to my father. She was talking about me. Protect our son. Don't let them use him. Don't let him become what they are. If you can't save the company, save him. The screen went black. I sat there for a long time, staring at my reflection in the monitor, my mother's eyes, my father's jawline. The child they both tried to save in their own ways. That's when I understood what the envelope really meant. It wasn't a gift. It was a mission. And the real inheritance wasn't money. It was choice. It took me 3 days to stop shaking. 3 days of staring at the files, my mother's voice echoing in my head, my father's words carved into my memory. Birth may grant a name, but only truth grants inheritance. Now I understood. He wasn't mocking me. He was warning me. He'd left my brothers their empire built on deceit, because he knew it would destroy them. He'd left me the evidence, because he knew I was the only one who would use it. But exposing them meant war. On the 4th morning, I drove back to Arlington. The Mercer estate stood exactly as it always had, elegant, empty, and dishonest. I parked beside the circular fountain, its marble figures frozen mid-pour, their faces cracked from decades of cold winters. Inside, I found Daniel in the study, pacing with a glass of scotch. Eli sat behind Father's old desk, his feet up, talking on speakerphone. Their voices stopped when they saw me. "Well," Daniel said, "if it isn't the mailman. You come to deliver another envelope?" Eli chuckled, swirling his drink. "You should have seen the party last night, Caleb. Champagne, new investors. Mercer Construction is about to triple its value." I looked around the room. Father's portrait hung over the fireplace, his eyes watching all of us. "You really think this place is going to stand another year?" I said quietly. Daniel's grin faded. "What's that supposed to mean?" I pulled a USB drive from my pocket, small, silver, engraved with the Mercer crest. "This is your inheritance," I said. "You might want to pour another drink." I walked over to the TV on the wall and plugged it in. The first file loaded automatically, a recording of a meeting dated August 1998. There was my father, younger, in a suit, sitting across from Senator Ashworth and 2 Helios executives. Their conversation was calm, businesslike, until my mother's name was mentioned. "Pierce is a problem," one of them said. "Then remove the problem," the senator replied. The video ended abruptly. Eli stood, face pale. "What the hell is this?" "Proof," I said. "Of what Dad really built. Of how he tried to fix it. Of how Mom died." Daniel shook his head slowly, forcing a laugh that didn't sound real. "This is insane. You expect us to believe?" "Believe whatever you want," I interrupted. "But in about 10 minutes, the FBI, the Department of Justice, and 3 major networks will have copies of everything. Including the audio logs, payment trails, and congressional correspondence your wives helped launder." Eli's drink slipped from his hand, shattering on the floor. "You didn't." "I did." I turned toward the window. Outside, the long driveway was quiet, but in the distance, I saw it, the faint flicker of flashing lights moving closer. "You think you're the hero now?" Daniel hissed. "You think destroying the family makes you righteous?" "No," I said softly. "I think it makes me free." He lunged at me, but I didn't flinch. I'd been his punching bag my entire life, emotionally, verbally, and once, physically. But this time, I wasn't the same scared kid trying to prove himself. I met his eyes and held his stare until he stopped mid-step. "Dad gave you everything," I said. "Money, power, legacy. And it still wasn't enough. He gave me nothing, and it's the best thing he ever did." Eli moved toward the desk, hands trembling as he grabbed the phone. "We can fix this," he said frantically. "We can spin this." "You can't spin truth," I said. "Not this time." The sirens grew louder. 10 minutes later, the front gate opened in a blur of red and blue. Federal agents poured in like a tidal wave. Daniel's last words before they cuffed him were venom disguised as pity. "You're still not one of us, Caleb. You never were." "That's the point," I said. As they dragged him past me, I caught a glimpse of Eli, crying, muttering something about his wife, his house, his reputation. For the first time, I felt nothing. No hate. No satisfaction. Just silence. Thomas Grant arrived soon after, standing in the doorway as chaos unfolded. "You did it," he said quietly. "You finished what your father started." "No," I said, staring at the agents hauling out boxes of documents. "He finished it. I just turned the lights on." That night, I checked into a small hotel in downtown D.C. The news hit by morning. Mercer Empire collapses in federal raid, 2 heirs arrested in $400 million defense fraud case. Their faces were everywhere, my brothers, once kings of construction, now mugshots on every screen. Commentators debated their greed, their downfall, their legacy. Not one mentioned me. And that was fine. Because the only headline I needed was the one in my own mind. The son who was never counted had finally evened the score. Later that afternoon, I met with Grant one last time. He handed me 2 sealed envelopes. "Your father's instructions," he said. These were meant to be delivered after everything came to light. The first contained a letter in his handwriting. It was short. "Caleb, I know what this will cost you. I spent my life building walls, and you tore them down in a day. Your mother would have been proud. Whatever you choose next, let it be yours, not mine, not theirs. Dad." The second envelope held something I didn't expect, a flight ticket to Zurich and a keycard to a Helios storage facility. On the back of the ticket, a note. "Not everything needs to be destroyed. Some things are worth preserving." I flew to Zurich that weekend. The city was quiet, glass and stone glistening under rain. Inside the Helios facility, a single safety deposit box waited under my name. Inside it, I found 3 things. A photograph, my mother holding me as a baby, my father's arm wrapped around her shoulders. Both smiling. A thumb drive labeled Legacy. A simple, old wristwatch, not expensive, but familiar. It was my father's first watch. The one he wore before he could afford Rolexes. The same one he'd promised to give me when I earned my place. Now, finally, I had. As I held it, something inside me broke and healed at the same time. For the first time in my life, I cried, not for loss, but for release. When I returned to the States, I made one last stop, my mother's grave in Fairfax Cemetery. I knelt down, brushing leaves from her name. "It's done," I whispered. "They can't hurt anyone anymore." The wind picked up gently, carrying the smell of autumn rain and pine. It felt like she was there, listening. "You were right," I said softly. "Truth doesn't break you. It frees you." And for the first time, I finally understood what freedom actually felt like. 3 years have passed since the night I opened my father's envelope. 3 years since the Mercer Empire crumbled, and the world learned that even the most powerful names can fall quietly, not with a crash, but with a confession. People think the hardest part was exposing them. It wasn't. The hardest part was what came after. Silence. Silence in the headlines after the next scandal took their place. Silence in the estate, sold to developers who turned it into condominiums. Silence in the name Mercer, now synonymous with corruption and greed. But silence also has another side, peace. I live in Vermont now. A small cabin on the edge of Lake Champlain. The kind of place where the air smells like rain and wood smoke, and you can hear your own heartbeat. There's no marble floors, no chandeliers, no boardrooms, just me, the wind, and the steady rhythm of life finally unchained from expectation. I left behind the Mercer name. Legally, I'm Caleb Pierce now, my mother's name. And every time I write it, it feels like forgiveness. The $127 million account still exists. I didn't touch most of it. I withdrew $10 million, just enough to build something that would mean more than mansions ever could. It's called the Halcyon Foundation, named after the project that ruined my family, repurposed into something good. We fund shelters, legal aid, and recovery programs for families destroyed by corporate negligence and violence. In 3 years, we've helped over 300 families. Kids like me, collateral damage in someone else's ambition. Sometimes, I get letters. One was from a teenage boy whose father worked for a mining company that cut safety corners until it cost lives. He wrote, "They called my dad a statistic. You made him a story again." That letter sits framed on my desk, right next to the old photograph of my mother. Every year, on October 14th, the anniversary of her death, I get a phone call from Klaus Dierman, the man who once warned me that they're watching again. The first time he called after the scandal, I asked him why he still did it. "Because," he said, "some ghosts don't haunt you, they remind you to keep walking." He tells me that the Helios account has grown, through investments, interest, time. The number now sits at over $200 million. Every year, he asks the same question. "Will you claim it this year, Mr. Mercer?" And every year, I give him the same answer. No. The boy who was never counted doesn't need to be rich to be real. Sometimes, I still dream about my father. Not the powerful man in the tailored suit, but the tired one I saw in the hospital, the one who couldn't look me in the eye. In my dreams, he's sitting at his desk, the same one where his heart stopped, writing something down. When I ask him what it is, he looks up and says, "Blueprints." "For what?" I ask. "For starting over." And I always wake up before he finishes drawing the lines. Maybe that's his way of saying it's my turn to design what comes next. One morning last spring, I returned to Arlington for the first time since the fall. The estate was gone, replaced by glass apartments and manicured lawns. But the old oak tree at the edge of the property was still there. The one my mother used to stand under when she waited for my father to come home. I sat under it for a while, listening to the wind. It sounded like her voice again, soft, calm, certain. And for the first time, I wasn't haunted by it. I whispered, "You were right. Truth doesn't break you. It frees you." Then I smiled, because she'd been right about one more thing too. The Mercer name wasn't my curse. It was my test. And I'd finally passed it. When people ask if I regret it, exposing my own family, burning down everything that could have made me powerful, I tell them this. I didn't burn it down. I just turned on the light. Because light doesn't destroy truth. It reveals it. And the truth is this: my father didn't die the villain the world thinks he was. He died a man trying to make peace with his sins the only way he knew how. By letting me do what he couldn't. He kept me at a distance so I could see clearly. He let me be forgotten so I could learn what it means to be free. And in his final act, he gave me not an empire, but the one thing he never had, a clean conscience. Sometimes I walk by the lake at dusk and catch my reflection in the water, my mother's eyes, my father's face. And I think, maybe I wasn't the son who wasn't counted after all. Maybe I was the only one who counted what really mattered. Money fades. Legacies rot. But truth outlives us all. If this story reminded you that strength is born in the wreckage, subscribe, share it, and comment where you're watching from.